It seems like in several of my recent dyno videos, people have asked me, hey, can you test the GOAT power bikes? Can you test the Power Goat? Can you test the whatever goat name they have? Mostly what people want to know about is this specific motor that's used on several of their bikes. They say on their website it's rated for 2,000 watts continuous, but it also says 2,600 watts peak, but then it also says 50 amp controller. And this is a 60 volt battery. And even if you don't take the fully charged 67 volts, 60 volts times 50 amps is, in theory, 3,000 watts of peak power. So I have a feeling this is gonna put down some really good numbers, which has the potential to put this bike up to the #2 spot on the dyno board. It's definitely not gonna be up with the Lyric Graffiti X on torque or peak power, although it could be on speed. Get back to that in a moment. I don't think it's gonna have the torque of the LMX 64 or the Biketrix XD. These are both mid-drive bikes with top speeds clearly right around 28 miles an hour. Very torquey, but limited on the top end. This is an entirely different type of motor setup that I think is gonna give us less torque, but more wattage than the Biketrix and the LMX. And then the question really is just gonna be, does this thing give the Lyric Graffiti a run for its money? Because it's a lot cheaper. It says on paper it's a lot less powerful, but the top speed is right around the same number. Let's use the dyno to see what the actual difference is. I will have to point out, the bike arrived quite nice. This like little black case had all sorts of parts and tools in it. It was very nicely put together. All of the wrenches and things you would need. It came with a big heavy duty lock that you could use for the bike, a little toolkit for it. So the presentation, if you will, so far has been pretty good. Manual start, unplug my battery on, screen on. Okay, pedal assist goes from 0 through 3. Not a lot of settings there. So I think that's gonna give me full power. Haven't actually ridden this thing yet. In 3, 2, 1. That feels pretty good. That's more torque than I thought. Well, I have to admit, I am pleasantly surprised by the torque. I thought for sure this was not gonna have as much torque as the two mid-drive bikes I just talked about. And after doing that run, I'm not so confident about saying that. I got 2,732 watts, which is still really good and a lot of power. But I got way more torque than I thought. That's really good for a direct drive hub motor. 61 pound-feet, 61.00, right on the dot. So I am going to put this above both the LMX 64 and the Biketrix XD. Now they do have a tiny bit more torque, but this one definitely wins out on the horsepower, and it also has a much, much higher top speed. This one obviously is a much lighter bike, much better mountain bike. This one is a better fat tire or plus size fat bike for trails. This one is obviously for the street, has the highest top speed. Definitely very different types of bikes. Obviously the Lyric Graffiti really just kills it on the torque and the power. But like I said, the top speed of these may not be so different. Now, hopefully the advertising they have and other reviews are not relying on the display speedometer, because it's definitely reading a few miles an hour too fast. I'm gonna have to get the GPS going so we can verify what it is. So it's a little odd to me that it only has 3 pedal assist levels, but they're really more like power modes, so you kind of have to think of it like that. This is one of those bikes where they're not really expecting you to pedal. Yes, you can, and they actually put a shifter on it, which some people aren't even bothering to do that. Some of the companies just throw a single speed setup on there. I'm trying to get my mirrors adjusted. There we go. Have them, I might as well use them, right? But this is Assist 1, full throttle. I'm doing, according to the display, 12 miles an hour. And here's what's funny, is if you bump it up into 2, it's like, whoa! we're going now. And that brings up the speed to probably a realistic 28 miles an hour. And then of course, if we bump it into 3, we start accelerating even more. Since my battery is pretty fresh, just off the dyno, the one thing I really want to try on this is the top speed, because they give it a really wide range, 40 to 50 miles an hour, depending on rider weight and terrain. And then I realistically think this could be a competitor to something like the Lyric Graffiti, but at a much cheaper price. They're selling this thing on sale right now for $23.99. The Lyric is on pre-order for $39.99. And yes, the Lyric has quite a bit more torque and the peak power is a lot higher. But if top speed is all you want, the Lyric would top out at about 48, 49 miles an hour maybe. This says 40 to 50. Let's see how close we can get to that 50 number. We're past 40. I don't know in what scenario you could get 50 on this thing. I think to say 40 plus is going to be accurate. So I think that settles it. It is quite fast. The Lyric does go a little bit faster, but for the money, not much. This bike feels more maneuverable. It feels lighter in the turns, but it's equally as stable on the top end speed. I feel like I could go 50 on this and I wouldn't feel uncomfortable at all. So far, I quite like the handling. I do find it hard to get that mirror right where I want it. Now on paper, this thing has like 60 plus pound-feet of torque. It is a really steep hill. Now I think a lot of that torque comes after the motor has had a chance to spin up. So I want to do something a little bit different here. What I'm going to do is go halfway up this steep hill, stop completely. So here we're simulating as if we were coming up to a stop sign on a really steep hill and then having to go. And how well does the bike handle this scenario? We're up to 10 miles an hour already. We're accelerating up the hill. 15. I'd say it handles that pretty well. It definitely has a different torque curve, so I think that's worth pointing out. Those mid-drives have it right at the very, very beginning, and this one I think takes just a little bit to get going, and then that kicks in. And it does handle better than I thought. I mean, the tires have kind of a nice, smooth tread to them. Now this is one spot where the Lyric had a little edge. It had just a few more miles an hour. This is a highway with 55 mile an hour speed limits. I'll probably have to go in the bike lane on the shoulder. And then things like the Ihora Chopper, that had even more top end speed. The scooter from EMP, which is not yet released, the video or the scooter, might have even more top end. But for a bicycle, this thing's fast. But this to me feels like the ultimate cruising commuter bike. If you really just want to get somewhere and get there quickly, because you just twist the throttle and you go. But to me, this is clearly not like a motorcycle. It just doesn't have the same level of power, the same top end speed. It's not highway capable, it's not freeway capable. It's only back road capable. I suppose this really is more like a moped. It's just a little bit too fast. Dollar for dollar, I think this might be a better value than the Lyric. It doesn't go quite as fast. It doesn't have quite as much power, but it goes almost as fast. And it's $23.99 versus $4,000. The battery is a bit smaller at 60 volts and 20 amp hours, but that's only a single battery. There's an option for two. It's only $5.99 to add a second battery, so then you're looking at 2.4 kilowatt hours of capacity, which is quite a lot. They do offer dealers for their bikes, so this is something I could actually put in my store. And I'm definitely considering that after my first ride on this thing. Price is right, the specs are good. I haven't really found any problems with it. There's a few little things I'd like to be better. Like, it comes with these passenger foot pegs, which is awesome. They don't have like a little detent to actually click up there, so they're probably pretty much always gonna fall back down. Not a big deal, but I would like them to stay there when I'm not using them. I do have to talk about the elephant in the room, however. No, not the excessive speed. This saddle, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But isn't it ridiculously long? This is the longest saddle I've ever seen in my entire life. It's huge. It's like they wanted your whole family to go out on an e-bike ride on one bike. It's seriously long enough for like 3 people. It's really nice. I mean, I don't know what sort of material this is, but it feels like high quality. It's been really comfortable. It's actually been more comfortable to pedal than most bikes with saddles like this, because the closer it gets to the front, the narrower it gets. And it's actually narrow enough that you're not whacking your knees up in the front here, which is kind of nice. So even though I'm not pedaling this thing around, it's got a derailleur, and you can pedal it more comfortably than most bikes like this, especially because you have so much room to move back and forth there to get your legs at a reasonably comfortable pedaling position. It's kind of ridiculous how comically large it is. Even the photos don't do it justice. But now that I've used it, I feel like I get it. Like, it's actually really nice. And if you are gonna get a bike where you're regularly gonna have a passenger, then this would be extra awesome. So let me show you some of the other things about the bike. It's got a key to turn on. Press the power button here to turn on the display. It's just assist levels of 0 through 3. We have odometer. You see I've done 14 miles on the bike so far. Battery's at 66%. We're down to about 60 volts. These are 67 volts on a full charge. And it looks like I've been averaging about 22 miles an hour. You have a motorcycle style control on the left for the signals. So that's the left signal. No audible beeps or anything. The rear is not nearly as visible or bright as the ones on the front, but it works. Brake light. And we do have multiple switches for the headlight, but I bet we have to actually turn it on through the display first. Yep. So we've got kind of a high beam, low beam setup there, or these outer lights are just on as kind of a running light. And it even has hazards. So if you just wanted some visibility and you're riding more in bike lanes, you could just do that. Now, I wasn't thinking too much of these brakes when I first saw them. I've seen this brand before. What I hadn't seen, that I can recall at least, are these specific calipers though. These are a 4-piston caliper. The brakes are 203s, and they are, like I said, extra thick, way thicker than your typical e-bike brake. So this thing's got a bit more stopping power, which is good. It definitely needs it because it does go faster than most e-bikes. And it weighs a little bit more. It doesn't feel heavy. I'll have to check the website and see if they even say what this thing weighs. No surprise here, they are using a cadence sensor. Whenever it's this style of bike, I say that really doesn't matter. It just should have it for legal reasons, honestly. The rear shocks are a step up from what we normally see on bikes like this. These are from a company called Fast Ace. They sell a lot of suspension forks to people with Surons and things like that. Got the same 4-piston caliper and brake rotor setup on the back. Let's see, is this motor hot? I'm gonna say no. I would say it's mildly warm. The Lyric bike was extremely hot after I stopped, after doing a ride. That same loop I just did, actually. So this motor feels much happier. And here's some close-ups on these tires. I really like the way these handle. I think they said on the website that they use a 4.5 inch on the back. Yep, 20 by 4.5, and a 4 inch in the front. The Triple Tree front fork felt solid. You can feel forks flexing backwards and forward, especially under hard braking on something from a high speed. I didn't feel any movement there like that. Never felt anything unstable. It's got a pretty fat clamp right here. Oh, that's cool. These lights have a like a laser kind of thing pointing down. Can't see it in the sun, but might be able to see the red spot on the ground at night. Now, shifting is very basic. Shimano 7-speed thumb shifter. Nothing fancy at all. Very basic stuff. It's actually kind of a cheaper end derailleur. They're using a freewheel, but those aren't parts that are really going to be used that much. I think you're really just going to throttle this thing around. If you buy this thing and you say, no, I'm going to pedal it, I don't know who you're kidding. You're not. This is using a very standard battery cradle, so this would be very easy to replace, but their prices on it are very reasonable. If you get the second battery, it's going to mount right here. You can actually see the motor cable right here, and that thing is nice and big and fat. That's what we like to see on a big heavy-duty hub motor. The frame's got extra parts bolted on as torque arms. It has those on both sides. So this is usually the part of the video where I look at it and I say, here's what's wrong with the bike. Here's what I'd pick apart. Here's what I would change. And scratching my head a little bit. I don't know. You know what? I got one. I got one thing that is below standard for everything the way this bike is set up. I got it. It's one of those cheapy horns built into the light, and it could be an actual horn. That's it. That's all that's all I can think of. There is a little scratch right there from shipping, but it's flat black. That'll be easy enough to touch up. In all seriousness, the horn's not really a big deal. So I like the bike. I'd probably keep it and ride it around, but I think the smart thing to do is to take this up to my shop in Grass Valley, park it amongst the other bikes, and put it there as a demo model so you guys can come in and test ride it for yourself. Good job, Goat Power Bikes. I really like it. For anybody watching, if you're interested in one of these, links in the description.